Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone had a good week. Having a good Sunday morning. I'm glad I'm saved. And I was thinking on the way to church this morning, we don't have to wait till the worship service to have church. I would like for God to move in our Sunday school lessons as much as He moves in our church services. And so this morning, I'm not going to teach out the book again. Maybe next Sunday we'll get to it, but I was praying about this on Monday or Sunday night, Monday morning, and the Lord dealt with me on a thought, and I tried to get away from it and couldn't get away from it. And it's just this thought that I had, and our reading this morning is going to be on Luke 23, 33 through 43. Luke 23, 33 through 43. It's a very familiar passage of Scripture. Some of y'all may even think it is the foundations of Christianity. Is a very basic lesson, but sometimes we have to get back to the basics to understand how complex our God really is. If y'all will help me this morning, we can get through it a little easier, and it's going to be a little ways that we hadn't, like we already moved the flower, and there's a whiteboard in front of me, and it's a little different this morning, but this is the way I felt, Brother Terry. I was going to go with this to show this. In Luke 23, 33 through 43, and it says, "And when they came into a place which was called Calvary, they crucified him, and the malefactors, one on the right and one on the left. And then said Jesus, Forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots. And people stood beholding, and the ruler also with them derided him, saying, He has saved others, let him save himself. For if he be the Christ, the chosen of God. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him, offering him vinegar, and saying, If thou be the King of the Jews, save thyself. And the superscription also was written over him in Greek letters, Latin, Hebrew, saying, This is the King of the Jews. And one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, If thou be the Christ, thou save thyself and us. But the others answering rebuked him, saying, Dost not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we received due reward for our deeds. But this man had done nothing amiss. And he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me, for thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, thou shalt be with me in paradise. Like I said, I'm going to do this a little different. I'm going to walk around like you remember how the old school teaching, they used to walk in the classroom and they taught. That's how I'm going to do this morning. And I'm going to need people to help me out. I know Brother Bryce will, but nobody else will. But I want you to entitle this, we go in this in life, and in a few weeks we're going to go on this trip. We go see Brentley, and we got places to find out, Brother Mark, and we're going to these national parks. And in these parks, you walk up and you get to this place, and there's like a flag. This morning, I want you to figure we're in Jerusalem, and we're at a place called Calvary. We're at a place where there's probably a monument there, or a little inscription that says, Here is where Jesus was crucified. And then you can walk over, and we're walking over to in Jerusalem. Our feet gets a little dusty because it's sandy. You can go to his gravesite. And at Calvary, it's called the Mount, or called Golgotha, if you read it, which means the place of the skull. It is a place of death and torment. During the Roman rule, thousands of people were crucified as punishment. But what happened there? The process. What's the process of crucifixion? It says crucifixion followed by a bloody script of sorts that maximize suffering and prolong death. It began when one being crucified was stripped of his clothes and then beaten, and a short-handed whip had been made with the lengths of leather and bone and iron balls woven into the strips. So we're at this point before Jesus got there, he had been whipped. He has a crown of thorn on his head, and his inside, or his organs are just exposed. He's bleeding. He's sore. He's beat. He hurts. And it's all for you. He's in mourning. I can just picture a man. We cry over things of stumping our toes or hitting our hand with our finger with a hammer or things like that. And here Jesus is. His whole insides have been ripped out. He has been beaten. He has been scarred. But that's not the end point. That's just the beginning. He's been mocked. He's been told that, you can't do this. You're just a normal person. You're just an ordinary guy. And they're mocking him because we call him the King of the Jews. And then it says this person was beaten savagely with a whip, which was torn flesh. And we think, well, maybe we picture this Calvary as we just see the cross sometimes, Brother Mark. We don't see the before of that. So Jesus is whipped, like I said, and the torn flesh, it doesn't just go to the blood, but the muscles of the back. When you carry things, you use your muscles on your back to carry things and to move. And think about it, when they're beating Jesus, that's been torn. Those ligaments are out of place. Those things are not like they used to be. And it's just blood and oozing. And they say, I want you to carry this cross. After a beating, when they're being crucified, is where the ribs are broken. And they repeat the blows over and over and over. The victim would have been forced to pick up the cross and bear it, the one he was being hung on. Crucifixions are usually held outside the city on an upright cross that's permanently placed in the area with a crossbar. Usually this cross would weigh about 75 to 100 pounds. So if Jesus was built skinnier than I was, that was a little bit over half of his weight that he carried after he's been beaten, after he's bled, after he's been whipped, after he's been put in all this condition. And we know the story. It comes out and he couldn't make it all the way. Somebody picked up the cross and carried it for him. We know the story. But he still had to make it up the hill. He still had to make it past the mockery. He still had to make it past the uphill climb, the elevation change. And it wasn't a paved path, Brother Matt. It was a dusty path. It was sand, and it was probably hot. And it's probably had a bunch of rain. And if they have gnats there was probably gnats. And it's just, I want you to get this in your mind of where we're at. Like I said at the beginning, I'm going to be your tour guide today of Calvary. So how do they die? If you survive the shock and blood loss from the beating, then you're able to carry the cross to the place where you'll be crucified. Then live through your feet and your hands having to have spikes driven in them, and your final misery was just beginning. There are many theories as to what kills you as you hang on the cross. It's either from blood loss from the beating or to shock or dehydration. And it could be a combination of all the factors scientists believe, but it could be just one. So I read this, a Royal Society of Medicine in 2006 published an article that centered on Jesus' crucifixion. There's 9 possible causes of death for Christ. While suffocation from the weight of one's body hanging on a cross has been believed to be the cause of his death or crucifixion, others think that the process is more complicated of a chain reactions of event. So he's nailed to this cross, and he's hanging, and every time he breathes, he has to bring his body up and take a breath. And then he exhales, and his body just falls. Then again, he breathes, and he falls. When we think about that, well, I know his arms were nailed to the cross, and his feet were nailed, but remember, his back has also been exposed. So every time, it's not a fine finished piece of wood. It's not a stained piece of wood, but it's a rugged cross. Some believe that this cross was actually made out of dogwoods. Some believe cypress. Some believe oak. The reason they believe dogwoods, I was reading the commentary, the reason they believe dogwoods was made into the cross, and it's not from what I've understand studied, it's not in there. But the reason it is because after Christ had died, the dogwood never got tall enough to ever be chopped up to lumber to make a cross ever again. That's why we believe, or some people believe, that dogwoods were put in that place. But whether it be dogwoods or cypress or oak or whatever, it was still a rugged tree. The researchers from the RSM, which was the Royal Society of Medicine, believe that death came to those crucified by one or more body-failing processes. The study suggests that as a person suspended on a cross, like I said, struggles to breathe, the lack of oxygen would trigger damaged tissues and veins, causing blood to leak into lungs and into the heart. The lungs would stiffen and the heart would become constricted from pressure, making it difficult, then impossible to pump blood throughout the body. The lack of unoxidized blood would eventually cause the body system to fail and death would follow. Like I said, he's there, he's stripped, he's naked. Sometimes we picture him as got a robe on, but in the Bible it says he was stripped and naked to all the elements. It was probably, like I said, it was probably hot. There was probably insects. And I know this is kind of a gruesome and it's adults in this class, but I want you to really figure where we're at. What Christ went through for where we're at this point. And he's bleeding and he's struggling and he's deoxidizing his blood and leaking out. There's probably a mess at the bottom of the cross, but he's slowly dying. And he's got you on his mind. It could take hours, in some cases days, but in the matter of time before death would come. In Jesus' case, it took 6 hours. So, my question this morning is, what do you see when you look at Calvary? Today it's a national, or it's probably, I don't know if it's a national, I don't know what their term is over there in Israel, but it's probably a monument. It's probably a state park, as you say, in the United States. But for the world, you see, is this on? I guess it's not on. I'll talk without one. Y'all can hear me. We see Calvary as a cross. We see it as a place, but as the world shows it, they see it as a ordinary man. They see it as 3 nails. They see it as punishment. They see it as a place that it's just something to look upon, that we look at in disagreement. That we look at that it's not what we want. It's not. It's a place we just look at and we're not going to look at it. It's disgraceful. It's something that it's not what the world wants us to look at. To the world and to the devil, it looks like defeat. To the world, to the devil, it looks like the losing ground. And I'll talk about this a little later in our lesson. To the world, it looks like a place to play games. Yeah. There were soldiers at the feet of Jesus, and I don't know what they had. It doesn't say it in the Bible, but to the cast lots, which was they played games, they gambled, as you would say, at the feet of Jesus. The devil wants you to realize that this is a place that you can play games at. This is a place that you can wager everything you have right here. This is the place that it's just a man. There was 2 other on his side that were thieves. It was just a man. The devil wants you to say it was just a rugged tree. That's what the world wants you to see. That's what society wants you to see. Society sees it as a symbol that some people wear on their necklaces or put on the back of your car. To them, it's just a symbol and nothing more. That's what society wants you to look at. And in constructing this morning, they see it as just a place you can go. It's a monument, as you can say. In that country, the world culture wants you to see Calvary is just a monument of Roman rule and punishment. You can go to Jerusalem today and walk the city, and then they can take you to the approximate spot of Calvary, or where Jesus was crucified, and then they can take you to the tomb, and you can see that the tomb is empty. There's nothing there. There's a plaque over the tomb that says he's not here. And you look at that, and it's just a monument. And they even have tours that you can walk through. And I know Brother Al and Sister Debbie has gone over there, and they've seen it, and they said it's a hot, desolate land like I've described. And you can do the tour of Jerusalem where they have Palm Sunday and where the Mount of Olives. You can do all this. Just like you do a tour in the mountains. You can do all this as a tour. But it's more than a tour to Christians. They probably even have little plaques, like I was saying, at the feet of where the approximate cross was at. They probably have a plaque where Jesus was in the garden. They probably have a plaque that reads, "Here it is. This is where he walked and broke bread." And I'm just trying to get you to see where we're at. It's a monument to the world. So we're walking through and we see the approximate side, and like I said, they probably have a glass case. Some of y'all have been in a museum and y'all see it. It's probably even got a prompt or something that has like where the nails. This is what the nail looks like that the Romans used. This is what the hammer looked like. This is what the cat o' nine tails looked like, and it's all in this glass box as you can, if you can just imagine it this morning. It's just laying here saying this is what it used to be. This is what it was. This is what it had in the situation. These are what the tools we used to use. And they just want you to come by and take a picture of it or just look at it. So you can memorize it that these were the tools. And those are great scenarios in our real world. But spiritually, they can kill us. Because sometimes we put our past experiences in a glass box and go back and say, this is what it used to be. This is what I used to go through. This is what I used to do. And so I looked up what a monument was. And a monument is defined as a statue or a building or even a structure that's put forth for a famous or noble person or events. That was what number one in Webster, and sometimes I have number two. Number two says it's a statue or a structure placed by or over a grave in memory of the dead. I want to take number two and say, well, that's what the devil does to our Calvary. He puts it as a structure placed over a grave in memory of the dead. Think about that. He's not there. He's not. He lives again. He's in heaven. He's not there. But the devil wants you to think that he's there. This is just a monument. This is just a place you look at. If you go to Atlanta and you're going to the airport, somewhere in between there, after 475 splits off, there's a graveyard to the left. In between an on-ramp and the main 75. Most of y'all have probably never seen it. Most of y'all probably never pay attention running 70 miles an hour and go, oh, look, there's a graveyard. It's some place that somewhere's dead and you don't notice it. It's been bypassed around. In these cultures in our churches, they build a bypass around Calvary. It's a narrow way to make it there on a little walking path that we do for tours like I was talking about, that you have to get out of your speedy life and stop and walk to it and look at it. This is not a ride-by-night tour that you plug in, you put your headphones in your ears, you ride on the tram bus. And here we are, and this is Calvary on the left, and we're just going to give you 3 seconds to take a picture, and we're going to move to the next spot. You got to get out of the bus of life and walk to Calvary to really experience Calvary. But this new church and new culture makes you believe that you can go and you can just take the bypass around there and miss it completely. But as long as you see it, it's okay. Brother Terry, as long as you just look at Calvary or the plaque or the thing like that, it's okay. We experienced it. We went. There's some people in this church,
that likes to go to Buc-ee's when you go to up north on 75. And y'all love Buc-ee's. Biggest gas station. You can buy hunting gear and brisket, and it all costs you $500, and you ain't bought a tank of gas yet. But some of y'all have to stop to get refueled, to strengthen your bodies, to cool off in the heat. And some of us stay on interstate and we just keep going. The devil wants you to keep going and don't stop at these rest areas. Don't let it just be a monument you look at, or a fixture, or the sign. There are several monuments in this world that I looked up, Brother Mark, that I thought was pretty interesting. You go on to Google, it'll show the top 35 monuments in the world. Some of them I never heard of. I was like, I ain't going to talk about those. But these three main ones are my interest. The first one is the Pyramids of Egypt. Stand as a reminder of ancient Egypt and the life and after-death process that they go through. In fact, the pyramids were built as monuments to house the tombs of pharaohs, and the death was seen as merely a beginning to the journey of the other world. The Washington Monument is on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. It was built in remembrance to George Washington, the founding father of the United States, a victorious commander-in-chief of the Continental Army from 1775 to 1783 in the American Revolutionary War, and was the first president of the United States. You go to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, Brentley was telling me when he flew over, you could see it. There's a monument for Pearl Harbor. It's called the USS Arizona. And USS Arizona is a memorial at Pearl Harbor in Honolulu, Hawaii, that marks the resting place of 1,102 fallen soldiers that was killed on December the 7th, 1941. It is remembrance that was the day that we struck war with Japan. It was the day that a lot of people's lives changed. It was a place that we remember the ones that have fallen before us, but it's also a place that we remember the ones that go on and fight for our nation now. All these monuments have one thing in common. That is that they serve as a reminder of something that has happened in the past, but not something that continues in the future. It represents an event or a person that is deceased or died. Don't get me wrong, you can go to the Pearl Harbor Monument. Not being I would love to go, or you can go to the Washington Monument or the World War II monuments, and you can feel that patriotism rise up. You can feel the presence of people that have lost loved ones in Vietnam and things like that. But it's not, that will never happen again. It is an ending monument of what that is. The devil has tried for years to convince the world that Jesus was just a man that hung on a cross and never rose again. In Matthew 28:11 it states, "Now when they were going, behold, some of the watch came into the city, and shewed unto the chief priests all the things that were done." These are the men that saw Jesus being taken out of the tomb. And they said, when they assembled with the elders and had taken counsel, they gave a large money unto the soldiers, saying, "Ye, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept. And is this come to the governor's ears? And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will persuade him and secure you." Even the chief priest paid off the soldiers to say it wasn't real. As Christians, we see it more than just a monument. As Christians, we see it as different things. The first thing I see it as is salvation. First thing I see is salvation. In John 14:6 it says, "Jesus said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me." Jesus was beaten, mocked, suffered, died for 3 days and rose again just for you not to be saved, but to have the chance and the ability to be given the gospel, to have the opportunity to understand the simplicity of the gospel. As the United States, we have a soft gospel, I would say. If you go to bigger churches, we don't do it here, but if you go to a bigger church, the preacher will get up at the end of the service and it's like, if anybody wants to be saved, just repeat after me. And there's no feeling, there's no conviction, we're just repeating words. The gospel is that He died and paid it all on Calvary, not just a bunch of words that you say. You have to truly mean it. It is a connection and a relationship that you become a new creature. The thief on the cross was even saved. And you think about it. He knew Jesus for the matter of, if he talked to him, it's not documented, it's only one little verse, but if he talked to him for the whole 6 hours that Jesus was there. And he said, I want to go with you to paradise. I believe you're the king. This is my commentary. This is South Georgia commentary. I want to go with you one day to paradise. And you think about it. We've been in church. I've been in church my whole life. I'm 28 years old, and I feel like when I stand in front of Christ, my life will be up on like a wall somewhere, and it says this is what He did. Like He's gonna go through and check off, make sure. But this guy didn't have it, Brother Bryce. I wonder if the angels came up to him and was like, "Who are you? Who are you? How did you make it in here? You didn't. You're not a church member. You're not on the church roll. You didn't play drums. You didn't teach Sunday school. You're not a preacher." But he said, and this is just me. It's not in here. But I think that the man said, he said, I could come. He died so I could come. He died so that I had the ability to stand here. The man that knew nothing about the miracles, the man that knew nothing about the salvation, knew nothing about the turning the dead to life, none of that. He said, I could come and be part of this. In addition to being crucified for your salvation, as I said, some of us Christians use Christ as a gaming piece that we play with our souls. And it talks about in Matthew 27 and 35, like I said, they were cast lots for their raiments. And I wrote this in here, are you willing to put your salvation as a gaming piece? Many people today are willing to play games with Christ at the feet of Jesus. Eternity is not a game. It's a choice that you'll make forever. Jesus did not die on a brutal cross for you to play games with your spiritual life, but He died for you to have the opportunity to accept Him. The second thing I thought of, that when I see the cross, I see mercy. I see mercy. In Psalms 103, it says in 10, He hath not dealt with us about our sins, nor rewarded us according to our iniquities. For as the heaven is high above the earth, so great is His mercy towards them that fear Him. And for as far as the east is to the west, so hath He removed our transgressions from us. Sometimes we put grace and mercy together. And I was looking this up in the dictionary. Grace is defined as goodwill, courteous goodwill. Meaning it's not what you ask for or what you deserve, but it's freely given. Mercy, on the other hand, is compassion, kindness, shown to someone and one's power to push or harm him. It's an act to be meant to relieve someone from suffering. What does that mean when I look at the cross? I say I see mercy and grace. It means that when we don't even recognize it, He rescued you. When I didn't recognize it, He had mercy on you so many times that we could spend our days here counting of how great and how marvelous He is. That's what I saw. The next thing I saw, Brother Brian, I saw hope. I saw hope. In Jeremiah 17:7 said, Blessed is the man that trusteth in the Lord, and whose hope is in the Lord. There's been many times in my life where I was in hopeless situations, and He showed up. There's many times I didn't know how I was going to make it through things, but He showed up, Brother Bryce, and gave me hope. A hope that withstands the darkness, a hope that withstands the test of time and the times and tribulation we're in, the hope that one day all this that we have is going to be gone, Brother Matt. All these troubles and trials is going to be gone, and that hope that one day I'll get to see Him. Just a glimpse of Him. Just to look at Him one-on-one, Brother Terry. That hope that I strive for every day. The reason why we live this, for hope. The next thing I thought about was healing. Peace. Healing and peace. I'll stand firm and say I'm an example of healing, and I'm thankful for that. In Isaiah 53:5, it says, "But He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities, and the chastisement of our peace was upon Him, and with His stripes we are healed." So before He ever hung on the cross, before He ever died, He was beaten and bruised for the cancer. He was beaten and bruised for my headaches. He was beaten and bruised for the people with problems in their bodies. But He was bruised and beaten for the peace of mind. The peace that passes all understanding. The peace that when you're making a decision in life and you're like, I don't know if I need to do this. I don't know if I need to walk in this. I don't know if I need to open that door to take that new job or buy this new thing. With Christ, you can have peace and understanding that passes all understanding. Or the peace when a loved one has passed away and you're like, I don't understand why this happened, but you have peace about it. That's what I look at when I see the cross. I see healing and peace. And the last thing I thought of when I saw the cross was joy. I saw joy. How do you see joy in a gruesome situation? How do you see it when the blood is everywhere and He's hanging, suffocating Himself, dying for you? How do you see joy? In John 15:11 it says, "These things have I spoken to you, that joy might remain in you, that your joy might be full." How you see joy is that you don't see just a man, but you see what the meaning of the man was. You see what He did for you. You see what He's given you. He's given you life eternal if you accept Him as your Savior. But there's a difference between joy and happiness. Happiness is only found in the objects and the materials that we find on this life, in the hobbies. But joy can only be found in God. Joy can only be found in Him, and that's the only way that we can find it. Men have spent many of joys, they say, in this world. They buy a new truck, or they buy a piece of hunting land, or a boat, or a motorcycle, whatever you want to say that you do, or they take extravagant trips and they find joy in that. It's not joy. It's happiness. It only happens for a small amount of time and for a season. Money doesn't buy joy. The old saying is money doesn't buy happiness. Some sorts it does, because you get to go experience things with money. I just recently bought a boat. I haven't got to use it yet, but I'm happy that I got a boat. It's bought with money, but it's not joy. It's not that thing that I think of every day. It's not a thing that I reminisce on every day, Brother Terry. It's not the thing that I get up every morning and it's like, I'm glad I got my boat, Brother Bryce. But I do get up every morning, Brother Denver, and say, I'm glad I got Jesus. Even when I feel like that my whole world is turned upside down, Sister Connie, I get up and have hope that one day I get to leave this world. One day He's going to come back, but I have joy waiting on Him. Even in the times that I don't understand where we're at, you can have the things that I wrote on this side of the board. You can have salvation as the first step.
It's open to every man, every woman, and every child. You can have mercy. The mercy of if you mess up, and grace, He'll pick you back up. I can have hope that one day, Brother Matt, we're going to be taken out of this life and that it's all going to leave it behind, because this life is nothing but a vapor. Brother Bryce, I can have healing and peace in this life, that I don't have to actually touch Him in the sense of I have to go find Him, but He's right there all the time. I don't have to pull up the GPS on my phone and try to figure out where's He at. He'll always be right there. We may not always feel Him like we used to. We may not always feel Him like we used to. Sometimes it's the cell reception of between us and heaven that we just got to get a little closer to Him. We got to get through the valley sometimes to get to that mountaintop so we can get a better reception. But there is hope and healing, and above all, joy. Joy that if He never does anything else, He's still God. The joy of knowing that one day we're going to get to take away His hurt feelings and sorrows, and Brother Matt, we're going to get to worship with Him in paradise. Do you feel like you're a little behind on your praise this morning? Maybe it's time for you to take the tour of Calvary. Read the little note on the bottom where He says He paid it all. But then you go by the grave clothes, and they're in that little glass cabinet because He left them behind, Brother Terry. Maybe it's time for you to look past the plaque and realize it was real and it's not a dead religion. Maybe you need a little help in your life and things you don't know how to handle. Maybe it's time you go back to Calvary. I'm going to say this, and I mean it in the utmost respect, and I'll say it to myself. Some of us have been to the mountains and to the beach more than we've been to Calvary. Sometimes we do things more than we want to do in this life than going back to the place it should have started at. How many times have you went back to Calvary in the last 7 days? I've been back multiple times just to get a glimpse, a touch, an inspiration to go on. It's important that we as Christians to continue to go back to Calvary. As I said before, along major highways there are things called rest areas. Calvary is when we go through life and we're on that trail and it's late at night and you got to stop off and just get you a little rest or, just rejuvenate. And they got vending machines, you can get food and you just need to rest for a little while. Calvary is when it's a place when life gets so out of hand and all our world is upside down, we can go to it and just rest for a little while. And generally around these rest areas, there's a gas station. A gas station to when you need to just fill up your spiritual life. Refill it. Get a little bit more than you had to begin with before the light comes on. It's a dangerous place to be in a Christian world when your spiritual light of fuel is going off. Don't let the world change your perspective of Calvary. It was not just a ordinary man. It was not just 3 nails. It was not just a hammer. It was not just a rugged tree. But to me, He is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Alpha and the Omega. He's my Rose of Sharon. He's my provider. He's my Savior. And most of all, He's my friend. I'm thankful for the cross. And I was studying this week, and every time I got to that point, I'm thankful that it's just not a man. It's not just 3 nails, but it's our everything. It's the thing that we didn't even know we needed, Brother Mark. The thing that we couldn't buy. The thing that we couldn't obtain. But He went in my place. He went in your place. Not for us to score 100. Not for us to be perfect, because there's not a perfect Christian. But through the grace and the mercy and His abounding love that we can make it. This morning, like I said, this was a little different. And if you didn't like it, I'm sorry. I liked old school teaching, but I like old school religion a lot better. So I wanted to bring both of them together. Maybe it's time for us this morning to look past what everything's going on and say, I want to take a tour guide this morning.
Sometimes tours are not all by yourself either. Sometimes you take your family along, Brother Clint. Sometimes, a guy told me one time that when you get in your 40s, I haven't made it there yet. I'm almost. I got a couple years. There's two things you do as a man. You either smoke meat or enjoy history. That's what he told me. He says either you love history or you smoke meat. I do both of that now, and I'm 28. But what I'm saying is that it's an individual affair. It's not just a history lesson. To your kids, it shouldn't be, well, Daddy got it back then. I hadn't seen him do this in a long time. It should be, remember last week when we took a tour to Calvary? And Daddy got pumped up here and got a blessing. I want to go back and see it again. Well, Brother Bryce, maybe it's when you're sitting at home and you're being, you didn't know how you're going to make it. You can take the devil back. I went to Calvary on Wednesday night or Sunday morning, and I got a blessing, and I'm going to hold on to that until I got to go back again. Just because it's in the sand of life and you don't know how to go, you don't know how to walk, and sometimes it gets difficult to walk in the sand. And if you go to the beach, you can tell how difficult it is. It's always harder to get your stuff off the beach than it is to take it to the beach. But even though the sand of life is sometimes it constricts us the way we walk, and you may not get to see the footsteps just as clearly, just remember there's always a path you can follow. You may not see the footsteps as clearly as you did before, but there's always a path you can follow. I was listening to a guy the other day, and he said, how long is eternity? Why not go to Calvary? Why don't you do this? When we get saved, how long is eternity? And he explained it like this, Brother Mark. If a dove flew from the moon to the beach and picked up a grain of sand and flew it back and did that for every grains of sand, that's how long eternity is. It's not a 30-year mortgage. It's not a 5-year car payment. It's not, the rental house that you're trying to pay off. It's forever. It's eternity. It's a choice that you make that don't only affect you in this life, but it affects you in the next. That's the reason we have to go to Calvary. That's the reason why we have to, make our tour every week to go by and realize, well, I'm saved. That's okay. I've been to the Great Smoky Mountains before, but I still walk the trails. I still like the history. But this morning, I encourage each and every one of us to walk by Calvary and realize what it truly means. That it's more than just a man on a cross, but it's our everything.